I mean, there's still more concern in Cincy. I mean, we were talking about how maybe it's a throwaway the tape game after week one. I mean, I was kind of saying that. And then you were holding me up last week. You were like, not so fast. Like, you can't throw away all of it. There's some concerns here. But 24-27 is the final score here. It's headline we got is early season blues or legit concern in Cincy. Offense looks better, but not enough to get the job done as they fall to 0-2. I don't. I think. I mean, they did start last season 0-2, so you got to remember that, and they did have a really good season last year. But I don't know, man. Where are you leaning?
So if everyone was healthy and we're feeling, this if this was the same start as last year, I'd be telling you give it another 2 weeks because Cincinnati starts slow. That's what they do. They started slow last year. They ended up finishing pretty well in the AFC. They're playing away from the Super Bowl. But Joe Burrow limped back onto the field after the game was over to go, shake hands, talk to coaches, whatever. He was limping onto the field. And we know that he had that calf strain in training camp. And he got back ready for week one and didn't look great in week one, but it wasn't, this isn't like a shoulder injury where you're worried about him throwing the ball. And he's not a mobile guy anyway. It was just a rainy game. They had a bad offensive day. I don't think I'm going to pull that back to his calf strain. Now, this week, it was normal weather, neutral weather, and the offense looked better. They put up 24 points versus last week. They scored 3 points. Much better. Well, they did have a special teams touchdown, so 17 points. But that calf strain is concerning because if this is going to be something that holds him out for a few weeks here, and they drop, let's say they start 1-4, 2-5, 2-4, something like that. If I remember correctly, their last stretch of the season is kind of rough. Like things get a little bit more difficult past their bye week. So let's see. The next couple weeks they have the Rams, Titans, Cardinals, Seahawks. So that's three very winnable games, if not four winnable. It's four winnable games. They'll be favored in all four of those games. Now, if they're missing Joe Burrow, I think they're only favored against Arizona and maybe Tennessee. The way that the Rams are playing right now, I don't know if they're favored against the Rams if Joe Burrow is not there. Obviously, we haven't
That's the
heard.
truth.
Yeah, obviously we haven't heard anything going one way or the other saying that he's going to be in or out this upcoming week. But then after that, San Francisco, Buffalo, Houston, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Jacksonville, and then you get Indy, Minnesota, and then Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Cleveland to finish out the season. Like that's going to be one of the more difficult stretches post bye week because they get the bye week in week 7 after those first four that we just mentioned. If they're limping into that because they're missing Joe Burrow at 2-4 or 1-5, their season might be over, man. Even in this AFC, which we thought was going to be much more competitive, obviously, unfortunately, I think the Jets may have been eliminated from that upper echelon of teams in the AFC
Sad.
now. But I do think that it's a mix of both because I think that there is some that early season blues that they've had a problem with in the past, but also there's concern here because they can't do this starting slow thing if they also are they're this far, they get to week 6 and they're still doing this because Joe Burrow's not here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this offense, even with Joe Burrow in it, had serious problems yesterday, man. I mean, obviously, it was, I don't even know. I'm trying to find an excuse for this Bengals team yesterday, but there really isn't that many, man. I mean, Jamar Chase, where were you, bro? I mean, you had 8 targets, which was third on the team, but Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins both had more targets. Tyler Boyd also had 8 targets, but he had more catches than he did. Jamar Chase, you just really couldn't get him involved too much in the offense, and maybe teams are starting to kind of figure out what the blueprint was last year. And if you start locking up Jamar Chase, I mean, obviously it's very hard to lock up a Jamar Chase, but you could run into some problems, man. I mean, this Cincy offense just looks concerning in general. But go ahead.
Yeah, and that is part of my issue with this Bengals offense is there's no Marlon Humphrey on the Baltimore
Yeah,
side yesterday, and you have the best wide receiver trio in the NFL. You need to be able to take advantage of that matchup if you're Cincinnati. You need to win this game. It's a home game, it's a divisional game. This is going to be the team that you're probably fighting for this division with. And this loss, I mean, now you've got to go beat them in Baltimore to even get that to a break even. If not, they're going to have the divisional, the head-to-head advantage over you.
Yeah.
That's going to mean something when all of these teams are going to be stacked up. You've also already lost to Cleveland. So now you got to beat Cleveland too. They're going to be behind the eight ball in terms of tiebreakers. And honestly, that could be the difference in them winning the division or even just completely missing out on the playoffs entirely, which would be a colossal failure here. I think some of this can be drawn back to head coach Zach Taylor. This is a guy that I've criticized a good bit in his tenure here in Cincinnati. I don't trust him, to be quite honest with you. As the head coach, I thought they should have fired him after the rough start last year. But they didn't. They may go to the AFC Championship, which makes it more difficult for them to fire him after a rough start like this. Not to mention NFL teams don't really fire head coaches this early on in the season. So it would probably need to take a missed playoffs or a round one exit for Zach Taylor to be out of here.
Yeah, for sure. And we will wait to see what happens in Cincy as far as that goes. And real quick before we move on, are you starting to lean Baltimore Cleveland as division favorites, or are you still leaning Cincy?
I don't know. I did pick Cincy. Even I think I put the picks in a little late last week, and I put Cincy as the division winner still. I still think it's Cincy Baltimore. Depends on what happens tonight with Cleveland. If Cleveland comes out and looks as good as they did against Cincinnati, against Pittsburgh again tonight, it'll be kind of hard to say that with how Cincinnati has looked recently.